All right. Well, I am Mike Realon from Olympic High School, who's doing some amazing work there. And I'm going to put in the podcast links and so forth and so on, the YouTube videos we have with Mike and his leadership and others at Olympic High School in Charlotte, North Carolina. A really incredible conversation with some of the students there and how they have benefited from being an Olympic and working with their partners, which is a significant piece to all this, I will point out, as well as a great YouTube conversation with partners in the Olympic and broader Charlotte, North Carolina area. The reality, as I can put it, as I see it, and then I'm going to let Mike and Clifton speak to this directly because they're in the mix. They're doing this stuff. I'm just talking about it, which is easy to do. Yeah, the point of this podcast series is to kind of surface how we could be redesigning or providing new resources, paradigms, programs, opportunities in our K through 12 system. And I even say not just our K through 12 system, but our community systems, our community ecosystems, which I think is part of the point here, that Olympic is not just a school, but they have an ecosystem of partners that are assisting and supporting them, working with their youth, creating greater opportunity for them. And as you know, in many of these urban settings, and not just urban settings, but across the board, schools are designed as boxes, and they are very good at keeping kids in boxes. And what we really need to do if they're going to be contributing to society and pursuing the lives they want to live and see the potential for gainful employment, we got to get them out of the boxes. So that's the point of this conversation, and Mike is doing it. Clifton is doing it, and I want you guys have about a half an hour, 45 minutes to tell people the value of this, and not just the value of it, but get into the weeds. If somebody somewhere that is not doing this already wanted to do this, how do they get it started? So I'll leave it at that. Let's do introductions real quick. Mike, quick
So,
introduction, and then
yeah,
go
so
for
I'm
it.
Mike Realon. I'm the Career and Community Development Coordinator at Olympic High School in Charlotte, North Carolina, part of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg school systems, about the 15th largest school district with 150,000 K through 12 students.
Yes, and my name's Clifton Vann. I'm the CEO of a local company called the Hyde Park Partners, which actually houses 3 operating companies. I won't get into a lot of detail with that, but suffice to say that we're in a technical business: hydraulics, pneumatics, automation. We work with manufacturers. So we are looking for a class of student, if you will, that has a keen eye for mechanical things, electrical things, has a background in those kinds of things. So that's our core business.
That's excellent. So I want to get into. I'm going to start with you, Clifton, because I've got a lot of Mike on video and so forth and so on. But I
So,
want to go
Chris,
to
you're like my wife. She is so sick of hearing me talk about this stuff.
My wife's sick of hearing me talk about it too. That's how this got started. I
well,
come home and I
at
complain
least
to
the
my
three of
wife.
us can talk.
That's a good segue,
So
actually.
yeah, okay. Well, yeah, Clifton. I mean, you're running not maybe one business, several business. You're the CEO. There's a lot on your plate. You're trying to create good product. You're trying. Why would you get involved in this? And what are you actually doing? Why would you get involved?
Yeah, so we serve about 6,000 manufacturing customers here in the southeastern U.S. And one of the things I saw in my own business, and I certainly saw it in my customers' business, was a loss of talent. Statistically, about 10,000 baby boomers are retiring every day. Every day we're losing that. So if you look in the course of a year, we're seeing a transition in demographics of millions of people. 10,000 millennials are taking their first job every day. So that didn't concern me at first. I figured I would just go rehire people as I would lose 40 and 50-year term people. Then I could just go and find them again. As I started to look around, I realized that's not true. We've taken shop classes out of high school. We've taken home ec. We've taken a lot of the hands-on type experiences that were even starting to disappear when I was in high school, are mostly gone now. So when I went out and started to talk about manufacturing, it had become passe. Former leadership in our own country says, we're not going to make stuff in our country anymore. Well, I think that's kind of come full circle. But what hadn't happened is we had not evangelized to the world that we were a good place to work. And I don't mean my company per se, but I mean manufacturing in general, and that we needed you. I give you a great example. There's a local company here north of town. They put an ad in the paper. They needed to find 1,000 people, and these jobs paid 6 figures. About the same time, there was a report that came out, and Mike could speak to this better than I can in terms of the detail, that cited Charlotte as being 50 out of 50 in upward economic mobility. So I asked myself, how can this company need to hire 1,000 people and can't find them, and yet we remain 50 out of 50 in upward economic mobility? It's like water all around and none to drink. How did we end up in this situation? And I realize in part it's a disconnect. And you mentioned it's sort of box style education. As I got more involved in education, I realized that education was education for education's sake and nothing more. And in the world I live in, where supply chain management is critical, Boeing is in South Carolina because they bought their supplier, not because they thought South Carolina would be a nice place to be. If you can't supply me products in a reasonable time and a reasonable quality, I'm going to insert my quality process into your plant. If that doesn't work, I'm going to buy you and put all my people in your plant and take over that process. So that's what we would do, right? In manufacturing, if you can't get product to me in a reasonable time, I'm going to integrate my people into your process. It's going to be very, obtrusive or encroaching. I'm going to live with you. And I thought, well, if I ask leaders around Charlotte, any of my customers, what's your number one asset? Without hesitation, they would say, what? My people. And then I would ask them, well, what kind of time do you invest in that? And then I'd get sort of a blank stare. Well, what do you mean? Well, we train our guys. Are you investing in the community? What about the supply chain of human talent? That's a dumbfounding question to most of them, until they now begin to go out and look and say, well, I need to replace Johnny, who's been here 50 years on that machine tool. I certainly can find another Johnny. No, you can't. So we've had to create our own supply chain. We've had to invest time and energy and resource to help the educators. And God bless Mike Realon. He's our bridge and access to that, and a willing partner to say, what do you want? What is the voice of the customer? Where is the voice of the customer at the table in education? Because we are the final consumers of that product, good or bad. And what I preach to manufacturers and businesses in general is, if you don't invest your time and energy into this, you will frankly get what you deserve. And you will spend lots of time and money after the fact trying to make reparations for the people that you have on staff. So, I think we can learn a lot from other countries like Germany, I think, that have really engaged apprenticeships. Many of the German companies that I represent, the CEOs were once apprentices. That's a foreign concept to us as Americans, that you could start at the bottom and it's more likely that you end up at the top that way. Here, we see the bottom as the final resting place, right? You go be a machine tool worker and that's all you're going to ever do. The Germans see that as just the beginning, and that you must understand all these steps in order to run the business. You must know how to machine parts and understand safety and all the other aspects of manufacturing. So at the end of the day, and I'll shut up, what it seems to me like, and my frustration has been outside of Olympic, why we don't broaden this concept. It doesn't have to be manufacturing based. That's just what's here in Southwest Charlotte, where Olympic is. You asked the question, how could I get involved if I'm not? My suggestion is get a map out and find the closest high school to your business and go knock on their door and ask them what kind of product they're producing for you. Because you should have an interest in that, because you are going to be the consumer. Or maybe you're going to have to hire people from Ohio and bring them in, or Wisconsin, or wherever else, far away. And that's going to be expensive and risky. My experience with that says they're eventually going to want to go back to Minnesota and help mom and dad with the farm. So after 20 years of my employment, they're going to leave me and go back home. So we need to do it locally. We need to grow them locally, and we need to be responsible for the outcome, and not in some passive way. Are we going to struggle to be successful as the United States of America, frankly? So that's my 2 cents.
So as
yeah.
Clifton says, so Clifton's a customer, right? And all of those employers, from our perception, are a customer, a primary customer, along with our children. We want our children, as Clifton said, to reach their human and economic potential, have a greater opportunity to realize upward economic and social mobility, because we're last. Yet, as Clifton noticed, talked about, identified all those jobs. So in Charlotte, there are about 10,000 unfilled manufacturing jobs. Really, these are high-paying, high-skilled jobs, many of them, that promise of upward economic and social mobility if you get the right education, the right kind of knowledge, and the right skill base, and you start to identify that pathway. So in our space, it's empowering Clifton and others in those key industries to kind of come in, serve as a board of directors, and really set up a new set of metrics with regards to how do we redefine success with what we're doing. And so, in our space at Olympic, because, we've been part of the Bill and Melinda Gates small learning community model since 0506, receiving $1 million to rethink education. And how do we make students who can be successful in school, in work, in life, but a much more holistic approach? And that's where that whole space of how are we fostering and helping students identify the pathways that can lead towards pathways both in education as well as careers that can lead them towards upward economic and social mobility, towards happiness, towards prosperity, and moving them to dispel all of those dysfunctional belief systems that are out there, because there's a lot more pathways of education and training depending upon your individual situation. So we are trying to empower both Clifton to come in and the business community to come in and take over, because we have 5 career academies and we want 5 different industry sectors and 5 different, industry sectors controlling what we do here at the school with our career academies. But we also have these kids, right? And we know the big data, and the big data doesn't look good, right? So we're going to have, millions of kids graduate.
Well, don't gloss over that, Mike. The big
What?
data. What is the big data telling us?
So the big data is telling us, we're going to have millions of kids graduate from high school, right? In June, we're going to stand up and celebrate and clap, but only 1 out of 10 of them will ever get a job related to their college degree, right? 1 out of 10. Yet, we're graduating the highest numbers ever from college, right? When we look at these other metrics, when we look at SAT scores, number of kids taking ACT, our high school graduation rates, right? We're improved so much over so many decades. Yet, when we talk about when we talk about prosperity in Charlotte, we're last in upward economic and social mobility. Half of those with college degrees in America, right? Unemployed or underemployed before the pandemic. 40 consecutive years of middle class decline, right? Highest numbers ever graduating from the university, highest numbers ever of unfilled jobs in America, 7.5 million, because of this disconnect that's going on between what education is pushing up the pipeline and what Clifton Vann and what those local industry sectors need, right? So how do we bridge this difference that's going on between what Clifton and companies and employers want to pull up the pipeline and what education is pushing up the pipeline. How do we get them better to align themselves? And when we look at Charlotte, half of our kids in the school district and at my school are below the poverty level, free and reduced lunch. Yeah, the Berkeley Harvard study demonstrated that all of my students then have less than a 5% chance of ever realizing upward economic and social mobility. Yet I would always ask all the educators, based upon all of this big data, what are we telling kids differently? What are we doing differently so that Americans make better decisions about the type of education they're getting in high school, that they're pursuing, and then the kinds of choices that they're making after high school? How are we arming them with information to help them make better choices about what pathways of education, and then helping them connect that education eventually to a job and prosperity? So, where we are trying to dispel those, what they call dysfunctional beliefs at Stanford in their life design, design thinking lab of what they're doing. And we're trying to take what we do with NAF Career Academies, taking those practices from Stanford of what they're trying to teach their kids to make the connections, and bringing it all down to here to Olympic High School, so that they start connecting better between their life, the education they're receiving, the opportunities in their community, and helping them onboard opportunities of education, training, skills, and helping them connect the dots to their hopefully, potentially what kind of job they want to do that can lead them to prosperity and happiness as well. And, I can look back, in my humble opinion, and I will look back and say January 6th and what we saw with the destabilization going on in democracy, partly to blame gets to be, half of our Americans who have a 4-year college degree, they're unemployed or underemployed. We have 40 consecutive years of middle class decline. And that leads people to frustration and anger, right? They're loaded with debt. They have a failure to launch, as Georgetown Center for Education and the Workforce says, right? They're delaying their lives, being able to buy a house, to get married, to have children. And then they look around and they see, wow, 30% of the kids who went to community college, trade show, or boot camp, they're making more money than I am, right? And that leads to that frustration and anger. Hey, I did what the adults told me, right? I went to college, I got a degree, but the kind of education, training, and skills doesn't actually meet the needs of a 21st century modern economy. So I always constantly will ask educators here and others, based upon all these big data numbers and what we see, how is our practice on the campus, in your classroom, how has it actually changed in trying to help youth recognize and understand what education pathway, what career pathways can actually lead you towards prosperity, towards happiness and joy, so you can live a life that has those ingredients within what you're doing.
Oh man,
Yeah.
yeah. You want to go on? Want to build on that, Clifton?
Well, yeah. I mean, I was just going to say. I mean, you look at it today. I think we're carrying on the edge of $5 trillion in student loan debt. On average, about a third or less of these kids are using that degree, and which suggests that we've misaligned things. We've not aligned the needs of our customer with the needs of our process. If I never left my office and didn't go see any of my customers, I can only guess what they needed. And if I got it right, it would just be luck. And so I think, without beating it to death, we've got to involve ourselves as the customer. And we've got to be clear, it's not a gift of money. It's a gift of time and resource and knowledge. And so all I do for Mike and what he does for me is I tell him what I need. We need OSHA classes. I need my kids to know about safety. Okay, well, where do I get it? Well, I can go find OSHA 29. Let's get that in there. I need our kids to know about 3D modeling and design. Okay, well, I don't have that capability. Okay, I'll go help find that. So we work as a community to solve each other's problems, because in the end, the problems are all ours collectively. So whether it's Secret Santa and we need funding to make sure our kids can go give presents to the needy, or it's we need to learn more about solar, let's go get a grant from Duke Energy and get solar on the school, or we need machinery, or we need your people to come and talk to us in the classroom. Just had one of my engineers over there yesterday moving some machinery and helping get it set up so that the kids could have it relocated in a better position. So we are like we are with our customers. We're integrated at every level. We bring 50 teachers out of Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools every year in something we started called Immersion. And we bring these 50 teachers out of school for 2 weeks, and we bring them to all our places of business. And we explain to them as the customer, how do we use your product? We have kids here that never went to college. We have PhDs, we have GEDs, we have a whole gambit of successful people here with different educational backgrounds. Do you understand how that works for us? And that every Johnny doesn't need a 4-year degree. I've got 6-figure welders across the street with a 2 years associate degree that have all the work they can stand. So we want to educate each other about who we are and what our needs are on every facet, whether I'm giving 4th graders a tour inside our place, or we're helping fund first Lego lead for the feeder schools into Olympic, or we're bringing teachers out to show them how we're using the product, if you will, or we're doing a field trip for 4th graders, or whatever it is. We're constantly involved, and I suggest hardly a week goes by that Mike and I don't have some kind of engagement, some kind of interaction. So this is not something I do when I don't have something else to do. I see this as my primary function, because my primary function is the sustainability of my company. And I can tell you, without good people, I have a business card and a logo and a building, and that's it.
So
I'm going to put you. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead, Mike.
Sorry, but as I think what you can read too, and what's Clifton said, and some of the things he mentioned, is exactly what you discuss with the ecosystem. Is that he has gotten to learn what's going on in school, and we're learning more about what's going on within his business and the demands. And when I say we, as education as a whole, and some of what those demands and needs are, and he's seeing ours. And so now, they're taking it so much farther downhill, as he mentioned about, they're funding all of the robotics teams at all the K-8 schools that feed Olympic High School, because they know by fostering that curiosity and interest and allowing kids to try stuff, right? They are really kind of seeing what they like and what they're interested in and what they're willing to go deeper in with their learning, right? That's what we all want them to be able to do. Foster the curiosity and give them a space to go deep with where they're going. And so together, collectively, we always come up with action plans and strategies about those big other kinds of metrics that we feel is going to lead to hopefully expanding the talent pool one day, and hopefully with kids, because they found what they're curious and interested in and want to go deeper based on whatever career academy we're offering at Olympic, which there are 5, and 85% of our kids will get at least one NAF Career Academy diploma, right? Some of them will get 2, and that's awesome because they're exploring their curiosities deeper. Because if they do go to Clifton, we want them to be happy employees. When we know the big data shows us 50 to 70% of Americans hate or dislike their job, 51% of Americans regret their college decisions. Well, if they're working for Clifton and they're unhappy, I always think, well, how productive are they? Right? Doesn't this hurt all of us? Again, destabilizing everything of their productivity because we haven't helped them right? Find that pathway of curiosity and interest, encourage them to go deeper, finding the different pathways of education that are available to them. And they've been to Clifton's company and seen the different people with the different pathways of education that are hopefully happily and prosperous with what they're doing at his company. So I look at that, that needs to be involved with the K-12 space, with what we're doing and helping them on board earlier and giving them the tools to do, this design thinking about how to identify and understand prosperity, happiness, curiosity, and how should that make part of my decision when I'm going to Northeastern University and what degree I'm getting, or whatever university, or if I'm going to the community college, the trade school, or the IT boot camp, helping them make good, solid, empowered in database decisions about that process of making those decisions.
Yeah. Yeah. And so our job is to give them that opportunity. I liken it to when you're a baby and learning to eat food. If you only let me try a couple things and that's all I know, and that's probably all I like or don't like, we want them to have lots of opportunities to try these things. And one thing that kind of gets missed in all this, you've got a community here of about, Mike, 700 companies that are involved at Olympic. Once you're in the slipstream, I had a young lady who interned with us one summer, and she came to me at the end of the summer and she said, "Mr. Vann, I'm so sorry, but this is just not for me." And I said, "Wow, there's nothing to be sorry about. You're so much smarter than most of your peers because you got one thing you can check off your list, that I'm not going to do that." I said, "It's not just about finding what you want to do. Part of that is finding what you don't want to do to narrow that list down." Now, with 700 companies in that slipstream, if you don't fit here, I know all these other guys and they know me, right? And so I can say, look, little Julie or little Jack's not going to work at Livingston A, but I think they'd be a great fit at Siemens. Roger, why don't you take a look at them? Or, Mark Rollinger at Bosch, why don't you take a look at them? So now they're part of a community of manufacturers. They're going to fit somewhere in our space if that's what they want to do. And if you can imagine that being bigger, where north of town it might be medical and east of town it might be aerospace, and that each one of these hubs of competency rose out of these local areas, then we could begin to pass them through those local competencies as well. We've got a kid here in South Charlotte who's an expert in medical. She doesn't belong down here. We need him up north of town. We need you guys involved in letting this kid go up there. We got a kid north of town who's a great mechanical engineer. We'd like to have him come down in our machine shop after 2:30 in the afternoons when it's closed. We'd like to have him coming down here and get access to this. So if you can imagine that we could build a hub where these spokes of the hub would all connect ultimately to the center hub. And that center hub would be smart enough to move these kids around to where their passions were becoming evident. And knowing that we had these different centers of competency within the region, we could say, hey, you're really good at this. You know what? You need to be going here. If I was Mike Krzyzewski, head of the Duke Blue Devils, I wouldn't wait till you're graduating from high school to talk to you about coming play basketball for me at Duke. If you got the skills, I'm talking to you and you're in 4th grade. And I'm talking to you about the camps I want you going to and the things I want you doing to get yourself prepared for middle school. And then the things I want you doing prepared for high school. So he's got a path and all that wired that says, if you've got the skills and they've been identified early, I've got a path for you to come play basketball at Duke. And that's what we want to create for engineers and for nurses and for all the other germane skill sets that need to be addressed.
So I got a follow up question. This is going to be a little wacky, but that's the way I roll here with this. So the question I was going to ask you, but I'm going to switch it up. The question I was like, so Mike, if there is a district leader, a district administration, district leadership team, maybe includes a high school principal, maybe it includes a couple faculty. I was going to ask you, like, what are the steps they could take to materialize, and then Clifton, I was going to ask you, what are the steps as a potential business partner that you could take? But instead of, well, you can integrate if you want. Instead of the specific steps, I actually want to ask you, if this works, is what is the mindset you have to materialize this? I mean, I think that right now everybody operates in a certain mindset. High school looks like this. The purpose of high school is this. Industry partners don't necessarily think about, oh, I need to reach down into my relationships with our community, and with our school system. But I don't know if that makes sense. Like, what is the mindset you have to materialize this?
No, that's a great question. And I spend a lot of my time, as Mike will tell you, evangelizing to industry about their need to be involved. Um, but I think you have to have a mindset past, next quarter's results. You have to have a leadership mindset, as I think we at least once had in this country, where we look to beyond tomorrow. That the investments we're making today will not yield us something tomorrow. It might be a year from now. It might be 5 years from now. It might be 10 years from now. But we know that planting these seeds, building these highways, building this railroad is going to create commerce. It's going to create a real bang, something that's going to have a ripple effect that's hard to measure. And I think, we've gotten into a case of leadership within industry that our biggest concern is next quarter's results and what's going to happen to the stock price. And, are we getting yelled at by shareholders and stakeholders? And what are you doing? And everybody wants an answer now. I mean, just think about it. If you're a collegiate football coach today, you get a contract for 2 years, right? Not 5 years. Used to be you got a 5-year contract. Now you get a 2-year contract. You got 2 years to make it happen. Well, I think that's counter to what we really want. What we really want is long-term sustainability. If you look at somebody like Nick Saban, that's been at Alabama now for quite a while, he's built a hell of a legacy there, and I'm not an Alabama fan. Mike Krzyzewski, another great example. You've got to build legacy and experience. It's not quick wins. And we've all been after quick wins in industry because we got drunk on that. Look what happened to the market in 08, 09, and giving out mortgages to anybody and everybody. We just got in this complacent methodology of who cares about tomorrow? Let's make it happen today. And I think the mindset has to change, that we have to look longer term now and say, the sustainability of our country is at risk here if we don't think about this in a bigger way. And
right. So before Mike gets into it, so now I will switch and say that you are one of several different industry companies in a local area, and there's no connection to the local high school. I don't care where it could be an urban setting, it could be a suburban setting, it could be a rural setting, whatever. So they listen to this podcast, they listen to you, Clifton, talk about this, and Mike, they think, wow, this is like, I'm all on board. What does someone in your position do to reach out to the high school, and what do you do? What do you say? How do you start the conversation? How do you get people to even consider this?
Yeah. Well, I mean, speaking for myself, I literally did what I suggested earlier. I looked on a map, and my dad had sort of driven the idea that we must do whatever it takes to preserve manufacturing in the U.S. because of all the things Mike had said earlier: the sustainability of the middle class, security of the country, et cetera, et cetera. When I thought about that, I realized, well, we're not educating people. We're kind of saying manufacturing's bad. So we're not really going in that direction. And since the 70s, we've been losing manufacturing jobs, which said we didn't value them properly. I looked and said, well, I think education might be the first place that I have to go and talk to the school and see, what are you guys thinking about in here? So I literally looked on a map, and an Olympic high school is about 3-4 miles from my office. Said, I don't know anyone there. I had some friends that went there when I was in high school, but I'd never been there. And I found Mike Realon. Now, it just so happens that he had a particular job about working with the community and made this possible, but it's not essential for your first visit. I think it's to walk in and just say, hey, I'm Clifton Vann. I'm from a local community. I've never been here before. Is there anyone I can talk to? I'm just interested in education. We as a company are going to be struggling to find good people. We're losing great talent. And I was wondering if this is a place I could come fishing. And they may say, well, we don't know anything about that or whatever. It's just it's a conversation, and that's all it starts as. And I can tell you that without exception, all my customers know they have a problem in terms of the human capital. They do not know what they're necessarily going to do about it. And so we don't have to convince them that they have an issue, but we'll have to help them in how to solve the issue. But I think educators are seeing the same thing. They got a problem too. Our kids aren't getting the jobs they should be getting. We don't have the upward mobility we should have. We're missing something. So I think it's simply a matter of a conversation. It's a community conversation to get started with. And it might just be as simple as the business owner getting in the car and driving over to that school and meeting somebody.
So then to Chris on our end of this, Chris, can you hear me?
We losing?
Can you hear me, Clifton?
I can, yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah. I just wanted to make sure we had a power outage.
Oh.
So I'm hoping my screen's working. You know, I have two different screens.
Yeah,
Chris,
no, you're
Chris,
good.
can you hear me?
I think Chris may be locked out.
My grandson got on Zoom and kicked me out.
Oh, well, you know, we just had a power outage here. So
oh, really?
one of my
Wow.
screens went out, but I just wanted to make
yeah,
sure it has no impact on this.
Yeah.
So,
Mike, you want to follow up on that?
yeah. So, you know, from our end of it, you know, with regards to this, is that I think educators, though, too, they need to feel comfortable. As you said, there's a status quo thinking, right? About how we approach this, and we have to approach it differently, and we need to prioritize. You know, so we have all these other metrics, right, that are pushed down by, you know, wherever you're working in the school district, and you know, a lot of those metrics, like we talked about earlier, with test scores, SAT, graduation rates, kids going to college. You know, Ted Dintersmith in his book What School Could Be, he called that fool's gold, right? And I think if you look at some of the big numbers, yeah, we have 40 consecutive years of middle class decline, yet we have the highest numbers ever graduating from college, right? And then we have half of those people, you know, unemployed or underemployed, yet employers like Clifton are trying to fill 7.5 million. You know, what? You know, I think we have to start thinking a little bit differently. You know, at Stanford, and the School of Engineering and Design Thinking and their life design, you know, they call those dysfunctional beliefs that get people stuck, get companies stuck, right? And what really then should be kind of our priorities. So at my school, you know, there are priorities that are based on this career and college readiness, that we are functioning and in our process to listen to Clifton, his industry sector, to come in as a board of directors and help the design of what's going on in the school and rethinking some metrics. And we report out to that board of directors. So in the thinking, it's, are you comfortable? Because Clifton, Bosch, and Siemens, they're going to come into the kitchen and they're going to play around with the oven a little bit. They're going to know how the oven works and how it cooks its product, right? And then make recommendation because they want to buy the product. So in this, you've got to feel comfortable. And I would also say you got to feel secure.
Yes.
Right? That we're collectively in this together. Let's identify that we both want it to do better, right? And together we're going to come up with a design plan and action strategies that we're going to move together. Now, when I described this secret sauce at Olympic, saying that, yeah, on my board of directors, I got 5, nobody from the high school gets to vote. Nobody from the school district gets to vote. Our goal is to make career and college ready kids. And by college ready, we're not just talking that they can apply to college and have the right classes. You know, college ready is, I'm in a better position to make choices when I'm going to Northeastern about what kind of degrees I think I want to pursue. And it's connected because I think I want to do that kind of job. right? And helping them go through that entire process of starting to think about that. So if we're going to do that together, collectively, let's come up with the action plans. And then when we come up with the action plans, I tell Clifton and the board, you guys are going to make us better by making us accountable
Yeah.
about what we're doing from a high school standpoint with implementing and executing this action plan, and then looking at the key metrics that have been set up with how we're going to move forward, we think collectively. One, in helping kids get on a path that has the promise of upward economic and social mobility, happiness, and joy, but also simultaneously, as important is, are we helping to expand the talent pool of what's needed locally in this community, in the key industry sectors that we know are key to the economic plan of this city and region? It's collectively at the table. We need to have the trinity of higher ed, right? The business community and government. We all need to be sitting at the table together, working collectively as opposed to separate silos. And we need to create that ecosystem. And we have to be comfortable in there together and understand each other's individual interest.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just going to say the accountability thing is a critical point, and that's one of the things I've learned, in my time in education, if you will. It's hard to make changes internally. It's hard to change from the inside. Most of the change I see in corporate America is because of disruption that occurs from the outside, and so we have to be that disruptive force in education. But we also have to hold education accountable, and we have to hold ourselves accountable to education. So if our new machine tools get moved and don't get started up the first day of the semester, I'm downtown talking to superintendent of schools, asking, why is my investment not running? That's a different conversation she doesn't want to have with me than having it with Mike, quite frankly, because I'm coming from the outside. She knows I'll take this story to the news, that I have no shame in reaching success because it's not an option for me. I have to be successful because I run a business. My family count on it. We can fail our kids and still get by. We've seen it. We've done it in education. I can't do that. I can't fail and still continue to be successful. Sounds ridiculous. But so we bring an accountability to the table that says this is not something we would like to have happen. This is something that must happen. And if you can't get it done, we're going to go somewhere where it can be done, because we don't have an option, even if you do. And I think that message is important because it also brings context to the meaning of education. You're not doing this to watch them ride off into the sunset their senior year. You're doing this to get them ready to come to me or college or wherever it is they're going. And if you've not done that well, they're eventually going to end up on my doorstep. And I'm going to come back to see you and say, that product you sent me was not good. And now I'm back to say, we're going to change the process again. So the accountability is a key point here, and it's a key point in life, but it's certainly a key point for education. And you mentioned at the outset, we cannot fail our children. If we do that, we fail our businesses, we fail our government, we fail everything in our community. And because the community has not had a voice or has not taken the opportunity to have a voice, we've allowed for failure to be an option. And I simply put, at Olympic High School, at least at the Academy of Engineering, failure is not an option, because there's too many businesses and families at risk for that to happen outside of education. And so we keep that pressure on each other, that we have to continue to move forward. And Mike will tell you, we've had a lot of frustrating moments. We're trying to get the bureaucracy of large education moving in our direction. And saying we don't care about all those issues. We care about getting those machines up and running. We care about that software loaded to our computers before the first day of school. If we need to introduce lean concepts to you and planning and all these kinds of things, we're happy to do that, put our own people in there. We have relationships with Microsoft. Would you like me to have them come in and make sure those computers are booted up and all the software is loaded? We're not going to go a whole semester again without that technology in the hands of our teachers so they can do their job.
So I'm hearing a couple of things. I know we got to sign off here shortly. I'll put it this way. It may not be exactly right, but the co-creation and co-design and the partnership, the real partnership between the industry, the community, and the high school or the K through 12 system, and potentially the higher ed systems. Like, how are you thinking about the pathways that students can begin to explore what their potential futures might be like, what they could invest themselves in, what they might be interested and passionate? To your point, Mike, is really, 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 really important. The reason that you need to jump in down, because one of the questions I had, which I won't get into now, but is like, why don't you just work with the higher ed industry or institutions? But the reality is, kids are making decisions, being acclimated to even consider higher education or potential careers way down, even starting in middle school and high school.
It's
I mean,
too late. It's too late to wait
it's
to
too
college.
late, right? Exactly. So you need, and you want to build local talent. I mean, you can't always, reach out to out of the country or
Yeah.
out of the state, and why don't you build local talent? And this is again and again, this is the problem across multiple communities, that the talent pool is not there, the talent pathway is not there.
Yeah. And we want the talent to stay too. Where was Facebook invented?
Mm,
Where?
yeah. Well, I would
Harvard.
assume, yeah. Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Where was it launched? California.
Silicon Valley.
How much money came into California? $90 billion. Don't you think they'd rather have that in up there in the Northeast?
Yeah.
So I don't want the kids to leave either and go create a Facebook company in California and let them have the money. We want these bright kids to stay in North Carolina, but they have to have a career. They have to see an option to stay here. And this is part of the disconnect. What would I do in North Carolina? I'm moving to New York. I'm moving to LA, whatever.
Well, I
No, there's
think
a lot to do here.
yeah, I think my final thing, I'm going to give you each the last word here. My final thing is that really, I mean, I love everything you're saying, Mike. You were brilliant in your elocution of this, but uh, the metrics, like, what are the metrics we are now holding all of ourselves accountable to? The metrics are ELA and math scores, the metrics and graduation rates. But it seems to me that the real metrics are students pursuing livelihoods, gainful livelihoods? Are they pursuing livelihoods that they want to pursue, that are interested or they have passion around? Are they able to make a choice between a higher ed degree or going right into their careers, or getting into a career and assisting and supporting themselves and their families as they get a higher ed degree, for that matter? Like, as one of the Jenny Dam was a wonderful student who talked about working at one of the local industries and being the breadwinner of her family while she was getting her associate's degree at a local community college. So, and there's pathways also that can happen. It doesn't have to be higher ed. My 2 cents here, Clifton, they may be working in your company, and the pathway forward may be within the company. It doesn't have to, you don't have to go to a community college necessarily.
Well,
Or
and even if you do, if it's connected to your job, I'm likely to pay for it, number one.
well,
Number two, it's an education that you're going to value. It's not you taking something that you think is interesting, but your employer is not going to pay anything for it. So we align it then. So you're not done with your education when you get here. You're not done. And that's a key point I want to make. I want to continue to educate you, but now it's going to be around purpose. It's going to say, if you do that, you're worth more money to me. Oh, I like that idea. Then I'll go get that degree. Sure. And you know what? I'll help you pay for it too. So we begin now to align. It's like, pack your clothes. Where are we going? I'm not telling you. Well, that's insanity. And that's what we do today. You spend all your time getting ready for a trip that you don't know where it is. You don't know what you're going to need. And you don't even know if you're going to want to be there when you get there. Unbelievable insanity. And this is one of the biggest decisions of your life. It's like a prearranged marriage. That's what we're doing. That's what we're doing with these kids. You come in here, first time you ever have a job, and you think you want to work here. How do you know? How do I know? 6 months later, I've spent a lot of money on you, and you decided, I don't like this at all. Well, great. I'd rather do that on the front end. Think about how much money has been put into algorithms of social engagement, eHarmony, all these apps. We should have more of that when it comes to job engagement. Mike's working on some of that now. What are the characteristics? How would you know what you're interested in if you were 20 years old today? You have no access to any of that stuff. You wouldn't even know what questions to ask. And half the jobs you might be interested in today won't exist in 4 more years. They'll be gone. And the things that will exist don't exist today. So if you don't get out in the slipstream, how are you making any kind of informed decision on anything? Otherwise, just pack everything you got, because you don't know what you're going to get into. And you and I are going to spend a lot of time, money, and frustration trying to find your passion using my wallet. And I'm not interested in that. I want you to do that before you get here. So when you get here, you know you want to be here, and I know I want you here. So I got kids that have been working for me since 10th grade. I know by the time they're finished with college, they've been here for 6 years already. We know quite well whether we belong together or not. And if we didn't, that ended in 10th grade. So we're not wasting a lot of time and money building something, a bridge to nowhere. And that's a lot of what we're doing in education right now. And how could we not? Because you don't have any more information than most people, which is very little if you're 20 years old. So we want to get you out there and let you try it all. And I love to hear them say, I don't like this. That's great. You're smarter than the next kid.
And Chris, what Clifton just described, with some of those kids, it really is our model, right? We're NAF Career Academy, awareness, exploration, purposeful preparation. And now it's kind of interspersed with the Stanford Life Design Lab, kind of, which they kind of really do Mitch. We're trying to get kids to discover and get curious about something within our model, right? Then, what we encourage them to do is go talk to people, right? In this space, you think you want to be an engineer. Well, you maybe talk to Mr. Vann. You think you want to be an entrepreneur. Well, maybe you want to talk to Mr. Vann about that and start talking to actual people, right? And then, as you're kind of moving forward with this stuff, it's just try and do stuff. So for you, and you guys do experiential learning, you're the best in the country, right? But go try and do stuff, right? Make sure that's something that you like. So, I use these kind of simple terms. When you go to Stanford, they have this huge pedagogical map, right? But the guys who created it, Dave Evans and Bill Burnett, they say, hey, this is all we're doing. We're trying to get them to discover and get curious, right? Go talk to people.
And that's all we're doing. Get the middleman
right?
out. I don't want the guidance counselor.
Let's simplify this for kids, and let's get people out in the community to help out, because they're going to have to help out, because we got to have people who talk to people. We got to help kids go try stuff, right? Jenny Dam was top 10 in her class. She thought the only way she was going to go is going to State or Clemson, right? One day. But by talking to more people and then doing some stuff, actually she decided, hey, there's this other apprenticeship at Groninger USA, right? And considering my family's financial situation, I've heard this other dysfunctional belief, but hey, there's really another path here that I can learn, hands-on learning, and they're going to pay for my education for the rest of my life. No matter how far I go. I don't know. That's not a bad gig, maybe, for me.
It's a strange idea, but basically we're just aligning, the needs. It's supply chain management. Gentlemen, I apologize. I have to leave. I got some folks here.
No, this is great. You've been fantastic. Clifton, fantastic, wonderful. Love this. Mike, fantastic. I think we're going to follow up maybe in a couple of different ways so that we can spread the word and get people more involved. This is a wonderful thing going on in Olympic and in Charlotte. But it should be in every community. It should be across the country. It should be in every urban setting, no less suburban, even rural settings. There are different ways to make this work.
Have you been to Olympic, Chris? Have you been there physically?
I have not been to Olympic, but we've been.
Well, I was going to say, maybe next time we do the Zoom call, maybe Mike and I could actually be Olympic in the machine shop or something where people could see some of it,
Yeah, that would be great. It would be
So,
great.
and Mike, I need to follow up with you at some point. I got some folks, some rich guys from my dad's neighborhood want to come visit Olympic and see if we get some money.
Hey, you know us, we love rich people.
I thought you could make time for that. So as soon as I hear from them, I'll get in touch with you.
Thanks, Clifton.
All right, guys.